All right. So I'll go ahead and get started. So thanks everyone for joining the webinar this year. It's been about the 4th or 5th year that we've done this, second year on this sort of scale. So really appreciate y'all joining. Yeah, everyone should be muted. It looks like everyone is muted. If I hear any sort of strange sounds coming through, I'll ask you to mute, or I'll go ahead and mute you. I should have control for all that. Just some things to point out. I'm going to share my screen now so you can see what's going on. And so we do have a question and answer panel here in Zoom. So if you have any questions during the course of the talk today, go ahead and throw them in there. I'll also keep an eye on the chat. If you prefer to put in the chat, either one is fine. Yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. Let me just move some things around here. You should be seeing my screen right now. I'm going to jump over to the notes and just point out a few things, and then we'll get into the main topics. So this course or workshop came about, sort of evolved over the years as I started to learn more about using computational techniques, programming, if you will, in order to make my work in the lab more reproducible for myself, in order to allow myself to do some new types of assays or new types of analyses that I wasn't able to do previously. And then eventually to be able to share that with people that I'm working with, people in my lab group, for example. So, I think this is, it's really evolved as a tool to help me get my work done in the basic science lab here in the Division of Hematology. So, this course, as I've written, is, targeted for people who are really experimental biologists, but want to use rigorous and reproducible computational biology techniques to really enhance their work. One of the recurring messages that, I'm going to be, going back to and probably say this, a few times over the course of the next few weeks is, this is really about, giving yourself, your future self, a gift. Okay. So anytime you can, write down what you've done to produce a result, that's going to be helpful for you in the future, because, a project might take 2, 3, 4 years, and you go to submit the paper at the end of 4 years, and you don't remember really how you got that result from 2 or 3 years ago. And that can be a problem. So this is really about making it reproducible for yourself more than anyone else. In addition, recently within the latest grant cycle, the NIH has really enhanced their requirements for data sharing, and basically having a data sharing and data management plan for all NIH grants. So we as scientists, as basic scientists or translational scientists, will need to have the ability to reproducibly, archive our data and demonstrate for someone else how we, got the results that we got. So, having the skills that we're going to go through in this course is going to help you, have something to write that's going to be substantially better than saying, basically you can contact us for the data, or you can contact us if you have any questions. So that's really not going to be cutting it for NIH grants down the road. So I think this is going to be more and more of an important skill to have in terms of data management and computational programming techniques. So that's sort of the overview of why I started this course, basically this is going to be a course that we go through. There's going to be I'm going to demonstrate everything that I'm doing here on the screen, so you should be able to see that. If you have any problems or any questions, I'll try to get to them as we go through. If not, I would like you and ask you to, ideally put them in a forum where, everyone can learn from your questions and answers. Because if it's a problem that you're having, it's pretty certain that someone else is also going to have a similar problem. So we want everyone to benefit from sort of a conversation about these issues when they come up. And so there is a forum that's set up for doing just that. It works pretty well. And let me just show you how to find it. This is a little bit inconvenient here, but basically this is linked from the course website, which you should have already found. And this is just the GitHub website, which we're going to talk about later. But you go to the website and there's an issues page right here. This is the main page. You just click on issues and you can put your issue in here. You just say, I'm going to click on a new issue and create something. So, if you're having a problem, you get an error message, you don't know how to fix it, put it in there and I'll try and answer it. Okay, so that's issues. So let's talk about R. So, first of all, learning R is like learning a new language. It's going to be hard. There's going to be a learning curve. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to encounter errors. I've been doing this a long time now, and there's always errors that come up. For various reasons. Sometimes they're easy, silly fixes. Sometimes they're complicated. So don't get frustrated. Read the error messages. Google the error messages if it's not clear what it's saying to you, and that will almost always point you in the right direction for what's going on. Like I said, with the issues page, any problem or any error that you're having has been encountered before, and it's probably on a forum somewhere, usually Stack Overflow, is going to have the answer for you. And if it's not in the first three hits on Google, it's very unusual. So just be, don't be frustrated with it. Okay, so R is a computational programming language, a statistical programming language. And there's sort of two parts to what we're interacting with. One is R, which is the sort of the brains behind the machine, and then the other one is RStudio. And you can think of it as like the brain, and then sort of like RStudio is the rest of the body. All right, so RStudio provides our interface between us as the computer user with the computational brain of which is R. RStudio is called an integrated development environment. Basically it allows a convenient way for us to access the files that we need to work with, and to control the outputs, whether the outputs are a figure or a table or some other sort of document that we're going to be producing. Okay, so let me just bring up my R thing here. So this is more or less what RStudio looks like. Okay, and I have it sort of a blue color here just so it's a little bit easier to see, I think, on the videos. So what I'm showing you right now is called the console, and this is really sort of like the direct input and output for the R language. And you can see here there's sort of an opening sort of message that you get anytime you're in a new R session. You've probably seen that before if you've ever worked with R. RStudio is is the how we get things done, basically. So if we want to open up a file, we have a little file directory panel here. If we're going to produce some plots of our data, they show up here. Now if we want to look at some help resources, some help manuals for something that we're trying to do, they show up down here. So this is a very useful sort of information resource for us. In this panel up here, there's a few things that you were going to be interested in. The main one that you're going to be interested in is this environment. And you can think of an environment as sort of like the workspace. If you're, saving an object, or, we're going to talk about this, starting next week. But if you're, using a variable to store value, that's going to show up in the environment. And it's basically like the working memory for your session for the day. Okay. There's some other things that we're going to get to with these panels up here. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that, we can put things into the console directly. So we can say, 1 + 1, and R is going to give us the answer for that. So, so that's easy, and we can do, if we had some mathematical things that we wanted to calculate, you could use it as a calculator or and that sort of thing. But really, that's not what we're here to do. We're going to do some more complicated analyses. And if it's complicated, we want to have it written down. We want to save it, and we want to be able to, go back and tweak it maybe, or use it again. So, so really, the best way to, have something like to use something like that is through a script. Okay. And so what is a script? The script is just a text file, okay? So I can open this up here, and if I save this, I would save it as a .r script. And then what we could do is we could say, okay, well, let's do 1 + 1, okay? And then if I ran that, it would give me the same thing down here. So we can take commands from a script, and when I say, I can tell R I want to run that particular line, and I can run through it line by line, and the results will show up down here in the console. Okay, so that's one way we can do it. There's a lot of ways you can run things in R. You can click this button here, and that's going to run that line again for you. There's also keyboard shortcuts if you want to use that. So, so that's one way that you can do it. And that's often helpful, and particularly when you're working interactively, when you're trying to get something to work. We'll run line by line and go through a script that way. Another way to do it, which is a little bit better and a little bit more error-proof, is to source the file. In order to source it, you usually have to save the file first, so we can just save this as a sort of a example R. Okay, and if we save it, what's going to happen is the R is going to basically run this whole file from top to bottom. Okay, so I can click that source, and it doesn't produce any output. Well, that's because we haven't really specified anything to do. When it sources it, it's going to keep this value internally, and we'd have to tell it to more or less print that. So it's not very important for a very simple example, but as you get more things going on, let's say you're producing a table, you're producing a figure, some sort of a graphical object, and then writing that to like your hard drive, R is going to do all that in a row. And so why is that better than just sort of running it line by line? Well, the reason is that, if you encounter errors as you go through, you can, as you're running it line by line, you can miss an error, you can skip over an error, and that error might cause some unwanted problems with your output. It might change a value, it might, plug in the wrong data at the wrong point if you've got something complicated going on. So a nicer way to do it is to make a script that runs from top to bottom, and then you can always click the source button, or you can type in something like this into your console and say, I want to source this file, and it will run from the top to the bottom and produce the data. And ideally, it's going to be the same data and the same output every time you run it. Okay, so there's some ways we can sort of interface with the brains behind the operation. Okay, so let's sort of now start talking about the system. Okay, and I think this is a really important point, and I don't want it to be too sort of technical or dry. But really, I think you want to set yourself up for success by having a computer system that is working in a way that helps you and provides you a better user experience. R, as it's sort of out of the box, is pretty good. Over the years, I've appreciated some deficiencies in the way that it's set up. And there have been many efforts to improve those deficiencies. We went through some, sort of a different way of dealing with those deficiencies last year in this course, and I was still not happy with it. So over the last year, I've developed sort of a computing environment, let's say, for using R. R is still the same, RStudio is still the same, but just the way the projects and the programs that we use are arranged and stored and tracked is a little bit different from the standard procedure. So I'm going to take you through this week how to set that up on your computer system, and then you can, if that works for you, then you can continue to use that. And I can tell you it's been like very convenient for myself and for my research group that's using it on the lab server that I run. So let's just sort of go through in the next 20 minutes or so how to set that up, and then you'll have that, and you can do that on your own computer, and then that'll be useful for you. So the first thing you want to do is actually, regardless of whether you're using this system that I'm going to teach you, is something you want to do. R often will basically, as a default, will give you the option to save your workspace data. Okay, and so like I said, so if I was to go back here and say, all right, well, let's store this value. Let's say X, is like the value 3. Okay, so now that value is residing in my global environment. It's sort of been saved for this session. Well, and when I close R, it's going to give me the option to save that and then to reload it next time I start. Now, for something super simple like this, it's maybe not a big deal, but it might be that you at one point have 5-10 gigabytes of memory that you're using for this global environment, and then it might take 5-10 minutes to load that back into memory, and maybe you don't want that. So it's a convenience thing, but more importantly, it's a reproducibility thing, because if you work on a project and then you go away from it for 2 weeks and you come back to it, it's unlikely that you remember exactly how you produced everything that's in that particular file. So when I'm working with R and I'm saving something, I want it always to be saved explicitly with a certain amount of documentation so that I know how I got that particular result. And so saving your session data sort of defeats all that purpose. And so what we're going to do is we're going to turn that off. And the way you do that is you go to Tools and Global Options. So if you go to Tools and Global Options, the first thing here, it's going to say this workspace here. It says, it's going to ask you, do you want to restore this at startup? And you're going to unclick that, and then you're just going to say never ask, and then you're done. So, okay, so we'll apply that, and we're done. So that's definitely a recommendation for everyone. All right. All right, so here's a question coming up. Can you talk about how to save the code in RStudio versus just the variable versus the entire session? I think there are different commands for each, but I always forget. Yeah. So, so the question is, what's the difference between saving code versus saving data versus saving all the data for a session? So that's a great question. So one of the important things that we're going to learn over the course of the 6 weeks is the difference between code and data. And that seems trivial, but it's sometimes easy to mix the two together. And I think what you always want to think about is that your code is a set of instructions, and these should be text files that you can read and you can go back to and see everything that it makes logical sense. If you're saving an object, a specific data object, that's going to be a value that was produced from some input data, and then those instructions, that code operates on that input data, and then a specific data object is produced as a result of that. And that, if that's important, and more importantly, if it can't be easily reproduced, or it takes a long time to calculate, or if it's, let's say, there's certain random components involved in that calculation that you can't control, then it's best to save that as a specific object. And then when you save it, you want to save it with some documentation, and that gets into building a data package, which is going to be the last lecture. But in the meantime, as you're working with this, the command that you want to use is save. Okay, and so you're going to just do save, and then you say save the object, and you're going to do file, and you have to put in the file name here. Okay, file name .rda. All right, and that will save this value of x as a .rda file, which you then can load back into your session by clicking on it or using the load command. You can just say load x. Okay, so that's how you do that. Again, I don't want you to save your whole R session, because that encourages you to sort of work in a way where you sort of accumulate a lot of things and you don't know how you got it. And you want to be saving things incrementally with good notes, with good documentation, as individual specific items. Saving a whole list of 30 or 40 variables from your global environment is going to cause confusion. And so, yes, if your computer crashes, then you can be sort of up a creek if that happens. But the important thing is, if you're in the mode of working incrementally, you haven't lost much, because you've saved everything that was important up to that point, and then you can easily go back and start from where you left off. The other thing that we're going to talk about today is Git, which is going to help you with your text instructions, your code, and that's going to allow you to sort of rewind and go back in time. If you say, you break something, you delete a file that you didn't want to delete, that's really going to save you. Okay, so great questions.
Hey, Brad.
Yes.
Can I just ask you to clarify that save command for a second? So the save command you typed there, right?
Yeah.
Is that only gonna save the variable X, or is it going to save your entire script leading up to the variable X?
Yeah.
And also, when it saves the variable X, okay, suppose you've done some calculations and now X has a value. Is it only saving like what you are defining X to be, or does it save the associated value that's been assigned to X?
Yeah. So first of all, when the save command will only save the specific thing that you tell it to save, the specific object. Okay. You can combine objects into a list, for example, or a composite object, and then save that thing if that helps your organizational sort of process, and that's totally fine. But the save command is really only used for that. There is another command, I forget what it is, to save the whole workspace. I've never used it in like 4 years or 5 years.
So basically, I've seen this like save command that ends in something like .rmd. I think that saves like the whole code or something like that, but I can't remember.
Now your code is going to not. So this RDA file is like a binary digital file. So you can't, open that up with like a text editor and then read that file. So that'll be a compressed binary version, which is good because, as these things get large, you want to have all of your objects in as little, sort of space on your computer as possible. The text is going to be saved as .r files. So those are very different, right? So the code that you use to make X, to save it, to do anything else with X is going to be in a .r file, okay?
One other question.
Yeah.
Can you briefly talk about, what exactly is an object? Because I hear that term being floated around a lot, and then I never understood how an object is different, say, from a variable. And then particularly if you do like single cell analysis, right? They always talk about like Seurat object, and then I have no idea like what the heck actually goes into a Seurat object.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, Vicky. That there are some very technical answers and technical definitions of object and different classes of objects. If you're talking about a Seurat object or a cell data set object, these are objects in the sense they have a very defined structure. They have very defined rules that permit them to be valid. You can't make a Seurat object that violates any of those rules. So there's a very specific definition for certain objects. On the other hand, the way I'm using it this morning is to refer to anything that is more or less a variable that you would assign a value to and then want to save. Okay, so X is a variable. And it has a value. You can also make X not have a value, which is not very useful, but yeah. So so I'm just using object in a more colloquial or general term than like say a Seurat object, which is a specific defined computational thing.
So I guess you're using it interchangeably similar to a variable, basically.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, I can't, I'm not sure that's worth parsing any like differences there. So you could say it's a variable. Yeah. Yep. All right, good. So let's move on. Now let's talk about setting up this sort of computing environment. Now it's called Blazor templates, and I apologize for incorporating my name in there, but naming things is always hard in this business. So I just picked the first name I could think of, but that's what it is. It's called Blazor templates. Templates because it sets up a template for how you're going to operate your R sessions in your R sort of computing environment. It sets up templates for projects, which we're going to get into shortly. Okay. So the way you install that is with this command here. Essentially, it's available through this repository called R Universe. We have a few of our specific packages available on there. So you just run that, and that should be installed. I'm not going to go through that with you today, but what I will do is I'm going to run this command here. We're going to run that library command. Okay, I'm going to close that because I don't need it. All right, and we're going to run this command here. Oops, no, that's not what I want. We'll just type it in like this, library. Okay. And what that's going to do, it's going to give us sort of access to all of the functions that are in this Blazor templates package. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do is run this command here. Now, this is the command. Oops. What did I just do? Just delete it. No, I didn't. Copied the wrong thing here. There we go. Oh, this command here is going to, this is what's going to basically set up the whole environment for us. Okay. And let me just point out what's happening here. What I'm doing is I'm going to say, I need to make a name for where all of this R stuff is going to live on my computer. So I'm going to call it DS for Data Science 2023. Okay. And I'm going to put that name here. Okay. DS 2023. So what this is going to do, it's going to make two sort of folders together in the same DS 2023 directory. All right. So I'm going to start this running, and then I'm going to tell you what these folders are. Okay. So I'll run that one. All right. Here it's asking me, I'm going to make some, tell me I'm going to make some changes to a particular file. And it's telling me what I'm going to do, which is going to make some new directories on my computer system. So it's just confirming that you want to go forward with that. So we'll say yes to that. Okay. So it's doing a lot of things now, and we can just sort of watch this run. Let me just sort of go over here, and I can, I think, show you what it's done. It's created two directories within the DS 2023. Okay, projects, pretty clear. That's where all of my R projects are going to live. This R42 cache, so that is sort of where all of the sort of the action, behind the scenes is happening. All right, and there's a number of important things in here. One of the goals of this Blazor templates sort of environment is to make things explicit and findable for your, the thing to allow the things that are going to run your computer to be something that you can find and interact with and understand. Okay, what you don't want to do is you don't want to go hunting around in here and changing things by hand. Usually that will cause more problems. But if there are problems that come up for whatever reason, it's nice to have things available to you. One of the problems that I found with the sort of the default installation of R is that, like it's looking and storing things in hidden away places on your computer that you really can't find. You don't know where they are. You have to navigate to them. So this makes it all very explicit. It's right next to where you're going to be working with all of your R projects. So I found that to be a much more sensible thing to do. All right. So it's setting up this R cache, and what this is, there's a number of important things in here. First of all, the R profile. This is an R script that basically tells R how to start up a session. It's telling it where to look for repositories. So where it's going to, when I say I want to install a new package, it's telling you where to look for that. It's telling you where to look for packages, meaning if I'm going to be using any functions, which I definitely am, those functions have to be available via packages. And this tells R where to look to find those software packages. Okay. It's got a library. Okay. This library is a cache of packages. And what has happened over here is this function that I ran is taking all of these packages which were already installed in my system. Okay, most of these are just simply default packages or packages that were installed when I installed Blazor templates. It's copied them from sort of that hidden place, which no one knows where they are on my computer, into this directory here, library. Okay, so you can see all these things that are showing up over here are now over here in this library. All right, so that's great because now it's explicit. I can find where the software is that I'm using for my project. So that's good. But what's more important here is that these are versioned and hashed, meaning that not only do I have, like, let's say the AskPass package available, I have every version that I've ever used available to me. Okay. In this case, there's only one version, but if I were to install version 1.2, 1.3, 2.0, all those would be logged in here in their own separate directories. Okay. All the packages are also hashed, meaning that if I download version 1.1 and I download it again, but it's different, then I can keep track of that as well. All right. And in here is actually the sort of all the software that R is going to want to use for this particular package. Okay, so why go to all this trouble? Well, let me give you like a very common example. Let's say that you're working on a project, like your thesis project, let's say, and you got a bunch of things that are working and your analysis is great, your figures are great, And then you want to do, then you have like a collaboration, and you got to do some stuff on a collaboration project. So you go to another project, you load some new packages, okay? And what happens is there's been an update, maybe an update to a dependency of one of those packages, and that gets updated on your system. Now, when you go back to your original thesis project, now something's not working, something's different. You get error messages, or something turns up different than it was before. So this is a very common problem because, as you can see, there's many packages, they all depend on each other. And so unwanted updates are problematic, all right? And so what this system does that the base sort of default R installation doesn't do is it allows you to have a specific package set or a specific set of software tools for every individual project that you're using, okay? And it keeps track of it in a way that you can read and understand easily, okay? So that's why you want to be using a system like this. Okay, so I'm back in the cache now. I'm going to show you a few more things that are going to be interesting. One is, and actually I'm going to tell you now about this user project, okay? User project is, basically where each project is looking for the software, okay? This looks very similar to what I just showed you in the library, but it's different in that these are not actual copies of the software. These are links. These are virtual pointers to a specific version. And so this is what connects your project to a specific version in that library directory, okay? So anytime you update a package or do anything to change this software that you're using for your project, it's going to be updated here and then linked to the cache that I just showed you in the library directory. Okay, let's see here. A question here. All right. Okay. All right. So all right. So good. So let's go back here to this and show you a few more things here. Logs, we have essentially, these are the history files for everything you've done. So every time you start a new session, you have a new log put in there, so you can always go through and find out what you've done in the past. Source, you can basically ignore. That's sort of like just for the preliminary versions of the packages that you're installing. And then the package catalog is just a list of all the packages that you have in your library here. Okay. Dependency catalog is also something you're not going to want to be interacting with, but it's there to help speed up loading new versions of packages. There's a question here on the basically scripts versus console. So just as a refresher, you're going to want to use mostly scripts. Scripts are text documents that's going to contain the instructions that then get sort of fed into the console. The console is sort of the direct communication with R. Okay. All right, so let's, basically all that's been done on my system. It took about 2 minutes to do, so it doesn't take long at all. And you see here, it tells you what it's done. It's made a new installation. It's made a new base project. And you're going to says you should switch to the base project, and it gives you some further references there. So why is there a base project? What is a base project? Basically, you always want to be working in a project. If you're not, sort of weird and bad things can happen. And so always be working in a project. And what this will do is this keeps you always in a project. Anytime you try and close something or try and accidentally get out of a project, it will just kick you into a base project. Okay, so let's go into the base project. We can actually just get to that from here. We'll go to projects, base project, and click on that guy there. Do you want to open that? So now we're going to move into the base project. And from now on, we're not going to be out of a project. It won't let us really get out of a project. And that's always a good thing. So, okay, so this is going to load up here. And then All right, so great. So now we're in the base project. What does it say? It says create a new project using this command here. All right. Or if you've already had projects, but we don't have any projects because we're just starting, we can choose one from this little menu up here. So let's initialize a project. All right, so we can go here. I already went through all of this stuff here. And so let's create a project for the class. Okay, so we'll copy that. One thing, I'm gonna let this run here, and I'm gonna say one thing. Okay, so let's see here. We'll say initialize project, and we can simply put 2 dots. That will mean the parental directory. So we'll go up one directory, which is projects, and then make a new project here called R class project 2023. All right. So we'll run that one. It's going to do some things here. Let that run. I'm going to go back here and make these important points. Okay. So what is a project? And I want you to think, I sort of mentioned this at the beginning, but this is a really important point. A project should be viewed as a machine, a computational machine, a set of instructions that converts your data to something useful for your scientific project, okay, your scientific plan, your scientific hypothesis, your thesis, for example, your paper, anything you're working on. So you're going to take some data, and it's going to go through a set of instructions, and it's going to be operated on by a set of functions or pieces of software, and it's going to produce some useful output for you, okay? And that output is going to be usually a figure or a table or some other sort of document or some additional data objects, okay? So a project is that stuff in the middle, and so it's a big complicated set of instructions that should only be text files so that you can look at it and read it and understand what's going on. So question is, how is a project different than the code, or are they the same? I want you to think of them as the same thing. So the project should only contain code, okay? It should only contain code and, references to software, okay? So, and by that I mean, and I will show you in a second how this is tracked. It should only contain your scripts, and it should contain a list of all the software that you're using to properly produce the output that you want, okay? So yes, think of project and code as the same thing. And then when we talk about Git here in a few minutes, Git will be tracking all of that code for you, all right? And so when you're keeping it all as text files, you can always go back and see what's changed. If it broke, how did it break, that sort of thing. So great question. Okay, so what's been done is it all sort of happened behind the scenes, and we're now in a new R class project 2023. Great. All right. And now this looks different, right? So we have a new startup message. This is because this was started up using the R profile file that we created. And it tells you some important things. Okay, it tells you that you're in an active project. It tells you what that project is. It tells you what libraries that you're using. So it's directly connected to this particular directory, and that's where it's getting its software from. Okay, there's some additional default libraries that it's also connected to for certain packages that are not available in here. Okay, and it's linked to the cache here. As I said before, that's just the file that we were looking at before. Okay, great. So we are almost ready to roll here, but let's do a few more things. The next thing that we need to do is we need to set up Git and GitHub. Okay, so this is a little bit of a change from last year, where I made this a little bit optional. So sort of had it at the end last year, but now we're going to sort of cover it up front. Git is going to, like I said, it's going to track all the code in your project, and it's going to help you in many ways. And I've scripted it in a way that it's actually really easy to use. The hardest part we're going to go through right now, which is connecting your computer to GitHub. Okay, so what is Git? Git is a program that runs on your computer that tracks changes to text files. Okay, R scripts, for example. GitHub is a website that basically hosts your Git project, okay? Another word for a Git project is a Git repository. That's sort of a general term. So GitHub is just a way to put that on the web. Now, why do you want it on the web? All right, well, there's lots of reasons. One is it's preserved. So, if you like delete it from your computer somehow, then you can always get it back. You can clone it from the web and it's safe, okay? You can share it with someone. You can share it with a reviewer. You can share it with the scientific community. If the paper is published, you can share it with a collaborator. You can make a private project that you share with a few specific people. And so there's a lot of advantages to having this posted in a way that people can interact with it. Okay. So yeah, so let's get that set up. Now there's a few, when we look in this project here, there's a few things. All right. R, going to have all the R files in it. So that makes sense. All right, so let's go into the R files. For now, let's start with the Git commands. Usually when you start a new project, you're going to start with initialization. All right, but when you're doing this for the very first time on a computer, you're going to start with the Git commands. You're going to go all the way down to the bottom here. All right, and there's some things down here. There's commands to configure Git. You should only need to run these once. Well, sometimes things break, passwords change, connections don't work. So I'll leave it in here so you can always get back to this if you need to use it. Okay. So what I'm going to do is uncomment these lines here. All I'm going to do is I'm going to put my name in here, which in this case for my GitHub account is BlazorLab, and I'm going to put my email in here. This is just telling this is just telling R what GitHub account to connect to. All right, so I can run that one. All right, so that ran. Now, this is the next tricky thing. All right, so this is a command here that's going to create a token, which is like sort of a fancy version of a password. All right, and you're going to run this, and this is going to set permissions for you to basically properly have RStudio interact with GitHub. So if I run this, what it's going to do is going to bring up my GitHub website. And now I have to log in here, and I'm going to move this so y'all don't see my passwords and stuff, but I'm going to log in here quickly, if that's possible. Second. Go. And so let me bring this back up here so you can see it again. And it's going to bring you to a field like this. All right, so I'm going to say this is the data science class. Token. Okay, like I said, token is like a password. Then I'm going to click on this thing here and say I don't want any expiration, right? Well, it gives me a warning. It wants you not to set no expiration date, but I find it annoying and I don't feel like there's a huge problem there. So, I'm going to say no expiration. Now, all these things here, it's really confusing, but don't touch it because when you run that command that I showed you, it's all set up the way you want it. And then all you do is you click on this green thing here, and I'm going to move this out of the way again. So it's going to generate this token thing. I'm just going to copy it. Okay, so now it's copied to my clipboard. All right, so that's done. Next, you go here. Normally, what you're going to do is you're going to run this, and it's going to ask you to enter the token there. Okay, so that's fine. You can do that. You just type it in there, and then you're done. Now, in my case, I'm running this on a computer system that is running an older version of Git, so that doesn't work. All right, so I have to take this away here, and I'm going to do this slightly differently. It'll take me 1 second. Okay. Now let me just show you what I did. I ran this command here, edit R environ, and that brings up this R environment file. Normally, this token is sort of hidden in this internal program, and that's how it's recognized by R. What we're going to do, we're just going to replace that with the actual token. This is also sort of a security risk, but I think it's okay. And there's really no other way to work it on this computer here. So we're going to save that one. All right, so I just added that in there. I'm going to close it. So now you can't see it, hopefully. And then we're just going to restart. Save this, and we're going to restart. Okay. Start new session. And we should be good to go here with this. Okay, so questions, is Git similar to a Jupyter notebook? No, Jupyter notebook is basically just like an RStudio project, basically. And you can use Git for Jupyter as well. And is the GitHub token unique with each session? No, it's going to be stored. So it's either stored internally in that one sort of program that I showed you, or it's going to be stored in your R environment file. As I just pasted in off screen there. So, all right, so I'm going to run this here. That is something that you can run if you're going to do collaborations. We're not going to really get into collaborations and sharing repositories in this class, but if you're interested, I can help you with that. What if you lose what if you lose your GitHub token or forget it? You don't need to remember it. You don't need to write it down anywhere else other than in your R environment file, or enter it at that little command that I showed you. If it ever breaks, if it ever loses that command, or if your server has to restart or something, then you just have to go through this again. You just make a new token. Okay, just run that again and just get a new token, and it will, you can just reconnect. And so that's why I leave that in it, because sometimes that does happen, that these things sort of get disconnected and you have to fix it. So, all right, so good. So that's done. I'm just going to recomment all of these because I'm done with them. All right. And so we'll just go away from that one now. And now we're going to go back to initialization. All right. And so this is going to be the last thing that I think that we're going to get to today, but basically, you're going to run this for every new project that you set up. You're going to run this script, fill in the things, run it, and then delete this file because you don't need it anymore. All right. So you're going to put your name here for a license. So what is a license? A license is basically, sort of rules and legal legal terms to protect you and to preserve, like basically protect you so that no one uses your software for evil. Anyway, so we always want to put a license in there. So that was easy. A README is important. A README is basically like, where you write down everything that, what is this project? How do you use it? So anyone that's going to be working with your code is going to want to know how to use it and what it does. So that's just a descriptive file for that. You don't have to worry about that. It just renames your default Git branch. Then you're going to run this thing here. It says use Git, and you're going to say okay. Just click yes to that one down there. And then we say, it says a restart of RStudio is required to activate the Git pane. So we're going to see a Git thing show up here. So yeah, we can do that. So to definitely, and we can save the changes. All right, so now we have a Git pane up here. All right, and that's going to show you changes as they occur in your text documents. All right, and we can see here this M means that we've modified this file initialization.r. So we've modified it. I typed my name in there. So yeah, it's been modified, and we can actually click on this diff thing here and say, okay, well, all right, so we got rid of that line there. We replaced it with this line here. I added my name. All right, so that's helpful, right? So that's what we can get from this Git pane. Okay. All right. So now we want to connect to GitHub. All right. So now we can do this. I'm going to, usually we'll leave these as private to start, because, if it's a project, we don't want it public until we're ready. But since this is for the class, I'm going to make this false, so then we can all sort of share this project. So I'm going to run that. And So it's going to ask me, do I want to commit the changes and push to GitHub? And I'll say yes. Okay. Great, so there it is. So now it's a publicly available project that anyone can kind of find on my GitHub site. Cool, all right, so that's done. And then we're done. So delete this file after initializing the project. Okay, good. So then we can go over here, we'll select it, and then we'll delete it. Done. All right, so that's basically it for Git and getting set up. So we have a couple of minutes left, so I don't see any new questions. Let me show you one more thing here. I'm going to go to this file here, dependencies.r, okay? And what's happening here? Well, so what is dependencies? Well, dependencies is like all of the software that your project depends on, all right? So that's what dependency means. And basically, we're talking about packages. All right. So what is a package? A package is a collection of software, a collection of functions, sometimes a collection of data objects that you can attach to your R session and use. All right. And so let's say here we want to use the package conflicted. All right. Well, there's a lot of ways to install a package. It says conflicted is not installed. So let's try and install it. In the notes, you'll see I have some commands listed for how to do this. Okay. Then so you can use these, but they're also listed here on this dependencies file. So it's very easy. Let's install the conflicted package. And I'm going to go down here to install one package, say conflicted. And I want to do a new version of that because I don't have it in my repository already, so I want to install a new one. Okay. So it's going to go to the main R repository for packages. It's going to download that and it's going to install it. Initially, it's going to install it into the user project library, which is that second thing that I showed you. And then it's going to link it into the going to copy it into the library directory with the appropriate version, and then link it as well. Okay. So so that's how you install a package. All right. So we got 1 minute left. I didn't actually show you how to use the git commands. I realize now, but it's very easy to do. And we can run through it next time. But and these are all scripted for you here, and they're also on this gitcommands.r file. All you do is you basically run through these commands, and that will basically save your work in like a save point at that point in time. All right, great. So what I'd like for y'all to do over the next week is to try and get this Blazor templates environment set up on your computer system, and then make a new package. All right, it doesn't have to be the same package that I started or the same name or anything. Just your own package. Your own project. Get that set up so that you can sort of play with it as we go through and practice the sort of the more as we advance through the R techniques. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And again, the video will be posted hopefully later today. And any questions, concerns, put them in the issues page, and we'll see you next week. All right. Thanks.